Wes Brandt walked into his third bank before noon. Same request. Same folder, worn soft at the corners now. The teller didn't even finish reading it. She slid the application back across the laminate counter, and she said she was sorry, and her eyes were already on the next person in line. He didn't argue. That's the thing you have to understand about him. He didn't raise his voice or ask for a manager or lean on the counter and demand a reason. He picked the paper up. He folded it once, then again, into a neat square, and he tucked it into his shirt pocket, over his heart, like it still meant something. Like a man keeps a thing that used to be worth keeping. That was the morning. The afternoon was worse. The afternoon he sat down across the desk from the senior loan officer at Rampart Savings and Loan, a man named Raymond Fenn, and the lobby behind him was full, 9 people waiting in the vinyl chairs, close enough to hear every word. And Raymond Fenn looked at the number on his screen, not at the man in the chair, and he said it loud enough for all 9 of them. A man with your credit is a risk this bank can't carry. 9 people heard it. Wes felt every one of them look away. But there was somebody standing in the doorway of that lobby. A woman, 38 years old, with a folder of her own held against her chest. And she knew every lender in 3 counties by their first names. She knew the ones who said no by rule, and the ones who said yes by reason. And she was watching the whole thing. Cut before she says a word. If you've ever watched your own name turn worthless the day the work dried up, if you've ever folded up a no and carried it in your pocket like it still owed you something, this story is for you. So do me a favor before we go any further. Subscribe so the next one finds you. And in the comments, tell me the town where your plant closed, wherever you're watching from tonight. Just the name of it. I want to see how far this one travels, because there are more of these towns than anybody in a bank lobby wants to count. All right. Let's go back to the beginning. Wes Brandt learned to weld in his father's garage on Kessler Street in Harmon, Ohio. Before he was old enough to drive, his father would strike an arc and hold Wes's small hand back with one gloved palm and say, "Don't look at the light, look at the puddle. Watch the metal turn to water and back." And Wes watched. He was maybe 9. He has been watching metal turn to water and back for 32 years since. He spent 22 of those years at Meridian Fab and Weld, out on the county road past the grain elevator. Structural work, beams and columns, the bones inside buildings that hold the roof off the people underneath. He was good. Not loud about it, just good. The kind of good where the foreman brings the hard jobs to your bay and doesn't stand there watching, because he doesn't have to. Then the plant closed. It closed the way they all close now. Not with an explosion, with a memo. A company 3 states away did the math, and the math said Harmon didn't pencil out anymore. Last shift was a Friday in March. They let the men finish out the day. Somebody brought in donuts, which was somehow the worst part. And at the end, Wes turned in his badge, laid it in a cardboard box with 200 other badges. His name and his number on a little plastic card, dropped in a box. He kept the house, though, for now. The house his father built. I mean that literally. His father poured the foundation for that house on Kessler Street with his own hands in 1971, a wheelbarrow at a time, mixing it in the driveway. Wes grew up in it. His mother died in the front bedroom. His father died in the same one. And Wes swore, standing at the second funeral, that whatever else the world took, it would not take that house. The world, it turned out, had other plans. And the world had paperwork. $11,200 in arrears on the mortgage. That's what the letters said. The letters came in white envelopes with a bank's name in blue in the corner. And the last one said something new. It said he had 41 days to cure the default. 41 days to find $11,200, or the county would take the house his father mixed in a wheelbarrow and sell it on the courthouse steps. 41 days. Here's what I need you to know about Wes, though, because it matters for everything that comes after. Every morning through that whole cold spring, Wes Brandt still got up at 5, still put the coffee on, still laced his boots. And some mornings, before he caught himself, he'd be halfway to the truck with his lunch packed before he remembered there was nowhere to drive it to. The plant was locked. The lot was empty. There was no job. There hadn't been a job in weeks. And still his body got up and got dressed and packed a lunch out of 22 years of habit, because a man like that doesn't know how to be a man who doesn't show up. That's the fellow the banks were saying no to. A man who still showed up to a job that no longer existed. Now, 2 doors down from Rampart Savings and Loan, on the same block of Harmon's tired little Main Street, there was a storefront with a plain sign. Fenn Credit Counseling. Small operation. 1 woman, 1 desk, 2 chairs, and a coffee maker that had seen better years. And the woman who ran it was named Nora Fenn. Yes, Fenn. The same as the loan officer. He was her father. Hold that. Nora had left banking. She used to be inside those glass doors in a chair like the one Wes sat in. Now she was 2 doors down, on the other side of the counter, so to speak. She helped people who'd been told no. She read their files with them, line by line, and showed them what the number actually meant and how to move it. And along the way, over the years, she had learned something her father never bothered to learn. She had learned every lender in the county by name. Not the institutions. The people. The woman at the credit union who'd bend a rule for a good reason. The fellow at the community bank up in Delford who came from a plant family himself and remembered. The little CD-Fi office run out of a church basement that lent to folks the big banks wouldn't touch. Nora knew them all. She'd sent them 100 clients. And they trusted her, because she never once sent them somebody who wasn't worth the yes. She watched Wes Brandt through her storefront window that spring, watched him go into the bank on the corner, watched him come out, watched him stand on the sidewalk a second and fold the paper and put it in his pocket. She'd seen a lot of people take a no. She had never seen anybody take one quite like that. Quiet, careful, like the no was something he'd earned and meant to keep. There was an afternoon a client of hers was leaving the storefront, a younger woman with a baby on her hip, and at the door the client turned around and got a little teary and said, "I don't know how to thank you, Miss Fenn. You got me the same second chance somebody once got you." And Nora said, "Oh, you don't owe me a thing." And she said it fast. And she changed the subject to the baby's shoes, and she walked the woman out. And if you'd been standing on that sidewalk, you might have wondered what the client meant by that. The same second chance somebody once got you. Wes was standing on that sidewalk. He didn't hear it. He was folding a paper into his pocket. But it was said. Out loud. And I want you to remember it was said. It was the next week that Nora finally crossed the sidewalk to him. He'd come out of the bank on the corner, a different no. Same fold, same pocket, and she was locking her storefront for lunch, and their paths just met on the concrete. And she said his name. She said, "Wes Brandt." Not a question. And he stopped, surprised anybody in this town still said it like it was a real name. She said, "I've watched you go in 4 of these this month. I run the counseling place. I could make a couple of calls. I know some people who don't lend by the same rule book." And Wes said the thing he always said. He said, "I appreciate it, ma'am, but I don't take charity." Nora didn't flinch. She'd heard that one before, from prouder men and poorer ones. She said, "This isn't charity." She said, "Charity is when somebody gives you something you didn't earn. What I've got is a phone number. That's all it is. A phone number and a name to say when you call it." She said, "You still have to walk in there. You still have to be worth the yes. Nobody's giving you anything, Wes. I'm just telling you which doors are actually doors." And he looked at her a long second. And he didn't say yes, but he didn't fold anything up and walk away either. And 2 doors down, her father was watching through the glass of Rampart Savings and Loan, and Raymond Fenn did not like at all what he saw. The first door came at the community bank. I want to slow down here, because this is the one the whole town saw. This is the one they still talk about at the diner. Wes needed one clean shot at the arrears. One lender to say yes to the $11,200 and the 41 days. Nora told him the community branch had a program for hardship on a primary residence, federal money behind it, meant for exactly this. Meant for a man about to lose the house he was raised in. She said, "Go in Thursday. Ask for the residential officer. Bring your file." And Wes, she said, "Don't fold anything before you leave. Make them hand you a reason." Thursday, the lobby was full. It always was on the first of the month. Old folks in for their statements, a couple of farmers, a young couple looking scared at a table with a mortgage packet between them. 9, 10 people. And Wes came in with his folder and asked, quiet, for the residential officer. And who came out from the back but Raymond Fenn? Because Raymond didn't just work at Rampart. He'd started at the community bank 40 years back, and he still sat on their board. And he still made the hard calls when the branch manager didn't have the stomach. And Raymond had heard, from his own daughter's foot traffic, exactly whose file was walking in that Thursday. He came out to handle it himself. He sat Wes down at the officer's desk, right there in the open. No office, no door. And he opened the file, and he read the number. And he already knew what he was going to say before he read it, and he said it loud. He said it to the room as much as to the man. A man with your credit is a risk this bank can't carry. The lobby went quiet. The young, scared couple looked at their own packet like it might turn on them. An old farmer studied his boots. Everybody heard it. That was the point of saying it that loud. It wasn't a decision. It was a lesson, and Wes was the chalkboard. And Wes Brandt did what he always did. He reached for the paper to fold it. But before his hand closed on it, a chair scraped in the lobby. Nora stood up. She'd come. She'd walked over from the storefront, and she'd been sitting in the vinyl chairs the whole time, in the back, waiting to see if he'd take the no, lying down. And when her own father delivered the guillotine, loud, in front of the whole town, Nora Fenn stood up out of the vinyl chair and walked across that lobby. She didn't yell at him. She didn't make a scene. Not the kind you'd think. She just walked up to the desk, and she took a card out of her folder, a plain business card, and she set it down on the file in front of Wes. And she said, "This is Marlene at Harvest Credit Union, up in Delford, across the county line." She said, "Tell her Nora sent you. She's expecting your call." Then she looked at her father, her own father, 63 years old, 40 years a lending man, sitting there with the number still up on his screen. And she didn't say anything cruel. She just held his eyes a second, long enough that everybody understood. And she said, "Quiet. This is a risk I'll carry." And she walked out. The town saw it. All of it. The loan officer's own daughter, crossing her father in his own lobby, siding with the ruined Welder against the rules and the name and the man who raised her. By supper time, it was all over Harmon. By the next morning, it was at the diner and the hardware store and the church parking lot. The loan officer's daughter and the laid-off welder. You didn't do that. Not in a town this small. Not to your own father. Raymond Fenn found her that evening. He came to the storefront after close, and he stood in the doorway of Fenn Credit Counseling with his coat still on, and he was not shouting. Raymond never shouted. That was what made him hard to fight. He was reasonable. He was always so reasonable. He said, "Nora, you spent something today you can't get back." She said, "I gave a man a phone number." "Dad, no," Raymond said. "You put your name on a sinking man in front of everyone I've done business with for 40 years. He said, "Do you understand what your name is? It's the only thing you rebuilt." He said that. The only thing you rebuilt. And something crossed Nora's face, fast, and was gone. He didn't see it. Or he pretended not to. He said, "You have worked so hard to be worth something in this county, and you are spending it, all of it, on a name that is going to drag yours right back down into the mud you climbed out of. And Nora looked at her father, and she said, "Maybe I climbed out of the mud so I'd know how to reach back into it." Raymond didn't have an answer for that. So he did what reasonable men do when they've lost the point. He changed the subject to safety. He said, "Grant Sable asked about you again. Rampart's making him a full VP. Steady man. Sensible. He'd be good to you, Nora. He'd never let you fall." And Nora said, "Good night, Dad," and she locked the door behind him. "Hold on to Grant Sable too, he's coming." Now the doors start to open, and I want you to watch how each one opens a little wider than the last. It was raining the day Wes finally drove up to Delford. Cold spring rain, the kind that doesn't fall so much as hang in the air and soak you standing still. And his truck was old and the heater only worked on one setting, which was off, and the wipers smeared more than they cleared. And halfway up the county road the engine coughed, and he pulled onto the shoulder to let it settle. And Nora, who had followed in her own car because she said Marlene liked a face she knew, pulled in behind him. And there they sat, two vehicles on the shoulder, in the rain. And after a minute, Nora ran up through the downpour and climbed into the cab of his truck, because it made no sense to shout through two windows. It was close in that cab. The rain drummed the roof, the windows fogged, and for a while neither of them said much of anything. She had his file in her lap, damp at the edges. He had both hands on the wheel like the truck was still moving. She said, "Can I show you something?" And she opened the file, and she turned it so he could see it, and she started to teach him to read his own name. "Here," she said. "This line. This isn't you being a bad man. This is the plant closing, right here, this month. See the date. And this one, this is a medical bill you didn't even know went to collections. And this one, this is just an old card you forgot to close." She said, "This isn't a verdict, Wes. It's a story somebody else has been telling about you. And you can start telling it back." And at some point her hand came to rest on the folder, right over where his hand had drifted to the paper. Just for a second. The rain on the roof. The windows white with fog. Her hand over his, on his own file. And neither of them moved it. And neither of them named it. And then the engine caught on its own, and they both pretended that was the thing they'd been waiting for. They didn't touch again that day. But something in the truck had changed hands. Trust, I guess you'd call it. A degree of it. The first degree. Marlene at Harvest Credit Union was a heavy-set woman with reading glasses on a chain and a photo of her grandkids blocking half her monitor. And she liked Wes. You could tell she liked him. She read his file the way Nora had taught him to read it, as a story and not a verdict, and she nodded a lot, and at the end she took her glasses off, and she said, "I can do most of this. Most of it." She said, "I can approve you, but not clean." She said the number was still the number, and her board still had to sleep at night, and the way she could make it work was with a cosigner. Somebody with standing. Somebody whose name the credit union already trusted. "Get me a cosigner," she said, "and I'll fund your arrears by Friday." And Wes said, "Thank you, ma'am," and he meant it. And in the parking lot he told Nora, that's a no dressed up as a yes. Because who did he have? Who in Harmon had standing and would spend it on him? He had nobody. That was the whole problem. That was the number. Nora didn't say anything for a second. She looked at the credit union door, and you could see her doing math in her head, math that had nothing to do with Wes's file and everything to do with her own. But she didn't say it. She just said, "It's still a yes, Wes. It's a yes with a condition." That's the second door. There are more doors. That was door number 2. Door number 3 came a couple of weeks later, and it opened a little wider. Nora sent him to a CDFI, a community development lender, the kind that runs out of a church basement and lends to the people the system was built to skip. This one operated online mostly, with a real office 2 counties over. And they didn't lend against your past, they lent against your plan. And Wes, it turned out, had a plan. He'd had it a long time. He just never let himself say it out loud, because saying it out loud felt like charity, like a grown man asking the world to believe in him. The plan was this: reopen his father's garage on Kessler Street as an independent fabrication shop. Brandt Fabrication. Take the small structural jobs the big shops didn't want. The railings and the trailer repairs and the broken bucket on a farmer's loader, the jobs a whole Rust Belt county still needed done and had nowhere to bring since Meridian closed. He knew the work. He owned the building. He had his father's tools already hanging on the pegboard. All he needed was a welder rig worth a damn and a little working capital. And the CDFI, God bless them, said yes. But, and here's the shape of every yes in this story, watch it. They said yes to the equipment, to the business, to the future. They funded the welder rig and the working capital and the plan. What they could not fund, by their charter, was a residential mortgage in arrears. They could put a torch in his hands. They couldn't save the house it lived in. So now Wes Brandt had a strange and terrible thing. He had a way to make a living, and no house to make it in past the 41st day. But something was happening to him through all of this, and Nora saw it before he did. He stopped folding the letters. Have you noticed I stopped telling you he folded them? Somewhere in there it stopped. One evening at the storefront, going through the mail together, he took a rejection, and instead of folding it into a square for his pocket, he asked her for a folder, and he wrote a date on the tab, and he filed it, like a man who intended to still be around to need his records. Nora watched him do it and had to look at the coffee maker for a second so he wouldn't see her face. That's a man deciding to live. You file the paper when you plan to fight. You fold it and pocket it when you've already lost, and you're just keeping the wound. He was filing now, which is exactly when Cardinal Property Group knocked on the door. You've maybe not heard of Cardinal Property Group, but you've met them. Every dying plant town has met them. They're the cash. They're the ones who show up 18 months after the plant closes, when the houses are underwater and the people are exhausted, and they buy the whole street for cash, legal as a church, and turn it into rentals owned by nobody you'll ever meet. They fed on Harmon like they'd fed on 100 Harmons. Perfectly legal. Perfectly clean. Just a company doing math on other people's ruin. Their man came to the house on Kessler Street on a Tuesday. Nice enough fellow. Nice car. And he sat at Wes's father's kitchen table and he made Wes an offer. And it was, in its way, a mercy. He said, "The county's going to take this house in a matter of weeks. You know that. You've done the math." He said, "We'll buy it from you today, before the sheriff's sale. Cash, above what you owe. You walk away with a little money in your pocket instead of nothing. No sale on the courthouse steps. No neighbors watching. You keep your dignity, and you keep a few dollars. It's the sensible thing, Mr. Brandt. Everybody sensible takes this deal. And here is the truth I have to tell you, because this story doesn't work if I lie to you about it." Wes almost took it. He sat at his father's kitchen table, the table where his father used to fill out his own bank forms with the same worried face, and he looked at the offer, and it was real money, and it was clean, and it was a way to stop losing. He'd have a torch and a truck and a little cash and no house full of ghosts he was failing to save. Just walk away. Everybody sensible takes this deal. He picked up the pen. He held it over the line. His hand, a welder's hand, scarred and steady, a hand that had held an arc rock still for 22 years. His hand shook over that line. And that's where I have to leave you tonight. With the pen over the line, with the sensible offer on the table his father built, and 41 days shrinking behind him, and a phone in his pocket that had Nora Fenn's number in it, and a decision that was going to decide everything. Because two things were about to arrive that Tuesday night that Wes didn't know about yet. One was a voice at 2 in the morning that would remember exactly how he took his coffee. And the other was a secret, a thing said out loud on a sidewalk weeks ago that nobody caught. A secret about Nora Fenn that was going to cost her far, far more than a phone number to open the last door for a man she was starting to love. Whose house do you think had she lost first? Don't answer yet. Just hold it, and I'll see you in the next part. She showed up at 11:57. He heard the tires on the gravel before he heard the knock, and he didn't answer the knock because the door to the garage was already open, the way it always was when he was working, and she walked in out of the dark with a paper bag from the gas station on Route 9 and 2 cups of coffee, and she set them on the workbench without asking permission and without saying anything about the cardinal. Property group letterhead spread flat under the shop light. She handed him the cup. He took it without speaking. She sat on the upturned milk crate his father had used for 30 years as a stool, and she looked around at the shop, the MIG welder in the corner under a canvas tarp, the angle grinder hung on its peg, the hood on the nail by the door. Brant scratched into the back of the shell in his father's handwriting, put there the day his father bought it secondhand, and wanted to be sure it came home with the right man. She looked at all of it the way a person looks at something they understand, without being told. The coffee was black. He hadn't told her that. He tried to remember if he'd told her that, and he couldn't. And for some reason, that undid him a little, in the quiet way that small things undo men who've been holding the larger things together by sheer force of habit. He stood at the bench for a long time. She didn't rush him. After a while, he picked up the cardinal letter. He read it again, all the way through, the numbers, the timeline. The clean legal language that made taking the money sound like a reasonable thing a reasonable person would do. He read it the way he'd once read the manual on his first industrial welder, carefully, because the thing could either build something or burn it down, and he wanted to be sure he knew which. Then he folded it once. He folded it again. He tore it. The sound it made in the quiet garage was louder than he expected, and he stood there with the 2 halves in his hands for a moment before he dropped them in the metal trash can by the door. Nora didn't say anything. She didn't say good or wise or I knew you would. She just watched him with that steady green-eyed look she had that didn't require him to perform anything for her benefit. He went to the workbench and pulled the CD-FI equipment loan from the folder, the one she'd walked him through line by line, the one that covered the torch and the table and the first 90 days of materials. Not the house, not the arrears, but a foundation under the fight. He uncapped the pen. His hand didn't shake this time. He signed it. The sound of the pen on the paper was nothing. A scratch. But he felt it through his whole arm, the way you feel an arc when it catches right, that first split second, when the heat finds the metal and the metal gives, and something joins that wasn't joined before. He put the cap back on the pen. He set it down. He took the welding hood off the nail. He fitted it over his head, the weight of it familiar. His father's name pressed against the back of his skull, and he picked up the torch lead and he ran a single test arc along a scrap piece of plate steel he'd had sitting on the table for 6 weeks, since the day after the plant closed, waiting. The arc was clean and steady, and it lit the whole shop gold for a second, and then it was done, and the bead sat there, cooling, holding, solid. He lifted the hood. He said, "Thank you, Nora." She said, "Don't thank me yet." And she was right to say it, because the CD-FI money would keep the shop breathing, but the house on Kessler Street was still bleeding. 41 days on the cure notice had become 22, and the math on the arrears hadn't changed, and the private lender Nora had scheduled for Thursday morning, the one who worked out of an office above the hardware store in Crestfield, had already said, over the phone, in plain language, that equipment approval alone wouldn't move him. He would want collateral. Thursday came gray and early. Wes drove the pickup to Crestfield with the folder on the seat beside him. The office above the hardware store smelled like machine oil and old paper. The private lender was a heavy man named Doyle, who kept his glasses pushed up on his forehead and looked at Wes the way a man looks at a fence he's deciding whether to lean on. Doyle read the CD-FI approval. He nodded at it. He set it down. "Equipment's fine," he said. "Equipment I can see. Equipment I can sell if you go under." He tapped the mortgage figures. "This, I can't. This is a hole. You want me to hand you $11,200 to fill a hole with? I need something on the other side of it." "I've got the house," Wes said. The house the bank's already selling out from under you. Doyle shook his head, not unkind. That's not collateral, son. That's the problem. Wes felt the old thing rise in his chest. The wanting to fold the paper into a square and put it in his pocket and walk out with his back straight. He held still instead. He'd learned that from her. You sit in the no a second longer than is comfortable, and sometimes the no keeps talking. Unless, Doyle said. Unless what? Unless somebody with standing signs next to your name. Somebody whose credit I can trust to carry the note if you can't. He put his glasses back down onto his nose. You bring me a cosigner that holds water, and the money's yours by Monday. You don't, and I'm sorry, but I've got a business to keep breathing too. Nora was waiting in the truck when he came down the stairs. She had 2 coffees. She always had 2 coffees. She handed him the black one and didn't ask, because she could read it on his face the way she read everything. Collateral, she said, or a cosigner. He got in. He set the coffee in the holder and didn't drink it. Somebody the bank trusts. Which rules out everybody I know, because everybody I know is in the same boat I'm in. The whole street. The whole plant. He laughed, but there wasn't anything in it. 200 badges turned in, and not one of us worth a signature. She looked out the windshield at the wet street. She was quiet a long time. He thought she was thinking about who to call next. Which lender? Which door? He didn't know she was thinking about her own name. He didn't know what her name had cost her to get back. The sheriff's notice came the following Tuesday. Wes found it taped to the front door of the house on Kessler Street, the house his father poured the foundation of by hand in 1971, and he stood on the porch and read it twice to be sure the numbers were real. 41 days had become 9. 9 days. A date and a time and a place. The county building. 10 in the morning. The property to be sold at public auction to satisfy the debt. His father's house on a list with a case number, reduced to a line item, waiting for a gavel. He called Nora. She came within the hour. She stood on the porch beside him and read the notice herself, and he watched her jaw set the way it did when she was doing arithmetic she didn't like. 9 days, he said. Doyle needs a cosigner by Monday to fund by the deadline. I don't have one. I've turned this over every way there is. I don't have one. You might, she said. Something in how she said it made him look at her. The porch light had come on with the dusk. Moths were finding it. She was standing close, closer than the cold required, and her face was turned up to his. And for a moment the notice on the door and the clock and the 9 days all went quiet, and there was just the 2 of them on his father's porch with the light coming down warm. He didn't decide to lean toward her. It just happened, the way the arc finds the metal, the heat crossing the gap on its own. Headlights swung across the yard. A car pulled up to the curb, a clean sedan, and 2 men got out. Wes knew one of them before the porch light caught his face. The set of the shoulders, the good coat. Raymond Fenn, 63 years old, 40 years in lending, standing at the bottom of his father's steps looking up at his daughter, standing too close to a ruined welder. The other man was younger, careful in his movements. He had a folder under his arm the way some men carry a Bible. Nora, Raymond said. Grant offered to drive me. We've been trying to reach you. Grant Sable lifted a hand, almost apologetic. Nora, good to see you. His eyes went to the notice taped to the door, and something in him softened, because he wasn't cruel, he was only wrong. I'm sorry about all this. Truly, Nora stepped back from Wes. Just enough. Just an inch. But Wes felt it like a door closing somewhere in the house behind him. What do you want, Dad? She said. Raymond came up 2 steps. He stopped where the light could reach his face, and he looked at Wes, and then he looked at his daughter, and Wes could see the man measuring the exact distance between them and finding it far too small. I came to stop you, Raymond said, before you do the one thing I've spent your whole life warning you against. His voice was steady. It was the steadiness that made it terrible. I know what you're planning, Nora. You're going to co-sign this man's note. You're going to put your name next to his. That's between me and Doyle. It's between you and everything you built. He turned to Wes then, and his tone changed. And it wasn't anger, which Wes could have taken. It was pity, which he couldn't. Has she told you what her name is worth? Has she told you how she got it? Dad, Nora's voice had a new edge. A warning. Don't. But Raymond Fenn had spent 40 years believing that facts were mercy, that the truth, spoken plainly, protected people from themselves. He turned back to Wes with the awful gentleness of a man who thinks he's saving you. My daughter was foreclosed on at 29, he said. Bankrupt, lost the house, the car, everything with her name on it. She sat across a desk from a man like me and heard a man like me say no. He let it land. The credit she has now, the credit she's about to hand you, she built that out of her own ruin. Brick by brick. 10 years of it. And you'd let her spend the whole thing on 9 days in a foreclosure that's already lost. The porch went silent. The moths ticked against the light. Wes turned to look at her. And her face told him it was true. All of it. She wasn't looking at her father. She was looking at Wes. And there was something in her eyes he'd never seen there before. Because she'd never let him see it, the thing underneath the 2 coffees and the steady voice and the way she knew every lender in 3 counties by name. She knew them because she'd needed them. She'd been on the wrong side of every one of those desks. You lost your house, Wes said, quiet, just to her. A long time ago, she said, and the cosign. He was doing the arithmetic now, the arithmetic she'd been doing in the truck outside Doyle's office, the arithmetic he'd been too blind to see. If I default, if the shop doesn't take, it's your name on Doyle's note. Your credit. Everything you dug back out of the hole. I know what it is, she said. I did the math before I offered. You didn't offer. I was going to. And there it was. She'd been going to give him the one thing she'd nearly died getting back. Quietly, without telling him what it was. She'd have let him take it thinking it cost her a signature, when it cost her the only ground she stood on. Something closed in Wes then. Not toward her. Toward himself. A hardness he'd been carrying since the day he turned in his badge. The belief that his worth had died with the plant, that every hand held out to him was charity he had no right to take. He'd spent weeks learning to set that belief down. And now here it was again. And this time it had teeth. Because this time it was true. He had nothing. And she had everything. And the everything was about to become nothing, so he could keep a house the county had already sold. No, he said. Nora blinked. Wes. No. He said it louder than he meant to. You lost your house once. I'm not going to be the reason you lose it twice. He took a step back from her, and his shoulders went square, and it wasn't pride the way her father would read it, though her father would read it as exactly that. It was the opposite of pride. It was the only decent thing left in him. I won't sign anything with your name under mine. I won't. Doyle can keep his money. Raymond let out a breath. Relief? He thought he'd won. He thought he'd talked sense into the room. But Nora wasn't looking at her father. She was looking at Wes, and her face had gone very still. The stillness of a person who has just been handed back their own rejection in a stranger's voice. Because that's what she heard. Not I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. She heard I won't take your help. She heard the same no she'd heard across every desk in 3 counties, and it was coming from the one man she'd opened every door for. She'd spent her whole rebuilt life opening doors for other people and keeping her own brick shut. And now the one time she'd been ready to open her own. To spend the thing that cost her the most, he was refusing it, calling it too much, calling her too broken to risk. She didn't cry. Wes would remember that. She stood on his father's porch in the mothlight, and she gathered herself the way you gather a coat around you in a wind. And she picked up the 2 coffees from the porch rail, both of them, hers and the black one he never drank. And she said, very evenly, All right, Wes, Nora, you've made your position clear. She went down the steps past her father, past Grant Sable, who stepped aside for her with his eyes down. She got in her own car. She didn't slam the door. That was the worst of it. She closed it softly, the way she did everything, and she drove off down Kessler Street, and the taillights got small, and then they were gone. Raymond stood at the bottom of the steps a moment longer. He looked almost sorry. Almost. You did the right thing, son, he said. Wes looked at the notice taped to his father's door. 9 days. Get off my porch, he said. The next morning, Wes did not go to a bank. He'd lain awake most of the night doing the same arithmetic from every angle. And every angle came back with nothing. And somewhere around 4 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of the room he'd grown up in, he understood something he should have understood weeks ago. He'd been walking into buildings and putting his name on a desk and waiting for a number to say yes. That was her father's world. The world where a man is a score, and the score is a promise, and the promise is the only thing the bank can see. He was never going to win in that world. His number said no, and it would keep saying no. But Nora had never lived in that world. Not really. She ran a storefront 2 doors down from the bank that turned him away. And she'd built her whole trade on a thing the bank couldn't put on a form. She knew every small lender in the county by their first name. Not because of her credit, because of her. Because 10 years of doing right by people had made her name mean something the bank's numbers couldn't measure. She'd offered to make some calls. That first day, it's not charity, it's a phone number. You still have to be worth the yes. He got dressed. He took the folder. He drove out to the county lenders she'd talked about over all those coffees, the little outfits, the men and women who worked out of front rooms and back offices, and the second floors of hardware stores. He didn't ask them to lend to his credit. He knew what his credit said. He asked them what Nora Fenn's name was worth. The porch belonged to a man named Alvy Cross, the eldest of them, who'd been lending to farmers and shopkeepers around Harmon since before the plant closed. 2 others sat with him, a woman named Priya, who ran a lending circle out of the Methodist church basement, and a quiet man named DeWitt, who financed equipment for men the banks wouldn't touch. Wes stood in front of the 3 of them on Alvy Cross's porch, with his hat in his hands, and he told them the whole of it. The plant, the 9 days, Doyle and the co-signer he wouldn't let Nora be, the house his father poured in 1971. He told them what she'd done for him, and what it would have cost her, and why he wouldn't let her pay it. Alvy Cross listened to all of it. He was a slow man. He let the quiet sit after Wes finished. Then he pulled a folded sheet from inside his jacket and set it on the little table between them, and Wes saw it was a term sheet. Already drawn, the numbers already filled in. "We heard you were coming," Alvy said. "Nora called last night. Didn't ask us for a thing. Just told us what happened. And then she said," and I'm quoting her, "Don't you dare do this out of pity for me." Priya smiled a little. DeWitt didn't, but his eyes did. "So we're not," Alvy said. "This isn't pity. And it isn't for her. Exactly. Though I'll tell you plain, we're not lending to your credit, son. Your credit's a wreck. And we all know it. We're lending to hers. She spent 10 years earning a name in this county, one honest deal at a time, and she just spent a piece of it standing in a bank lobby, siding with you against her own father in front of the whole town." He tapped the term sheet. "That name's good with us. And she put it on you. So as far as the 3 of us are concerned, you're good with us too." Wes looked at the numbers. $11,200 spread across the 3 of them, so no one of them carried the whole risk. Terms he could actually meet, built around a shop that hadn't opened yet, structured by people who understood what a shop was. No co-signer. No collateral but the work of his own hands. "Why?" Wes said. His voice wasn't steady. "Why would you do this on her word?" Alvy Cross looked at him a long moment. "Because 12 years ago," he said, "she sat where you're sitting. Different porch, same wreck. And somebody gave her a second chance that the numbers said she hadn't earned yet. and she's spent every year since making sure other people got the same. You're just the next one. He pushed the pen across the table. That's how it works out here. It was never about the score. It's about who'll vouch for you when the score says no. Wes signed it on Alvy Cross's porch with the three of them watching. The pen didn't shake. He funded Doyle by Monday. He paid the arrears with a day to spare, $11,200, and the county pulled the house off the sale list, and the notice came down off his father's door. And the 9th day came and went with no gavel. But he wasn't done. There was one more door. He walked into Rampart Savings and Loan on a Thursday morning at 11:57. The lobby was full. It was always full at that hour. 9, maybe more, in the vinyl chairs. The same chairs. The same laminate counter where the teller had once slid his application back across at the third bank of a bad morning. Grant Sable was at a desk along the wall, and he looked up, and his face changed. Raymond Fenn was at the senior officer's desk, the big one, the one that faced the lobby so everyone waiting could see who held the pen. He was mid-sentence with a customer when Wes crossed the floor and stood in front of him, and the sentence stopped. Wes didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The lobby had already gone quiet, the way a room goes quiet when it senses something. He set two things on Raymond Fenn's desk. The first was the paid-in-full receipt from the county, stamped, dated the case number closed. The second was the deed to the house on Kessler Street, the house his father built, free and clear of the bank's sale. Raymond looked at them. He didn't touch them. He looked at the receipt and the deed, and then he looked up at Wes. And for the first time since Wes had known the man, Raymond Fenn didn't seem to know what his own face was supposed to do. "The house isn't for sale anymore," Wes said. "Thought you'd want to see the paper, since paper's the only thing you ever believed." "How?" Raymond said. "It came out before he could stop it." "Your credit. There's no lender in 3 counties who'd lend to my credit." Wes nodded. "You're right about that. You were always right about that. My number said no, and it kept saying no. Every desk, every door." He put his hands flat on the desk and leaned in, and his voice stayed low, and that was what made the whole lobby lean in with him. "So I stopped asking my number. I went and asked the county what your daughter's name was worth. And they built me a loan out of it. Out of her. 10 years of her doing right by people. And it turned out to be worth more than anything your bank could put on a form." Raymond's jaw worked. Nothing came out. "You taught your daughter that a score is a promise a man makes the bank," Wes said. "You raised her on it. You built your whole 40 years on it." He straightened up. He picked up the deed, but he left the paid receipt lying there on the desk for the lobby to see. "You never once asked what the bank ever promised him." The silence in the lobby was total. 9 people in the vinyl chairs, none of them pretending not to listen anymore. A woman at the counter had put her pen down. Grant Sable, along the wall, closed the folder in front of him. He closed it slowly. And then he set it aside and he sat back. And there was something in his face that wasn't defeat, exactly. It was a man realizing he'd been standing in the wrong place, and quietly stepping out of it. Raymond Fenn looked down at the receipt on his desk. The stamp, the closed case number. 40 years of telling men no, of being certain that a number measured a man's soul. And here was a number that had been paid in full by everything he'd refused to count. He didn't argue. That was the thing Wes would remember. The rules, wearing a face, sat at the big desk with the whole lobby watching, and the rules had nothing left to say. Wes turned to go. She was in the doorway. Nora Fenn stood in the front door of Rampart Savings and Loan, with the noon light behind her, and Wes understood she must have been called. By Alvy Cross, by Priya, by DeWitt, by one of the lenders who'd told her what he'd done in her name. She had a look on her face like she'd walked half the way there, not believing it. The whole lobby had turned to look at her now. The loan officer's daughter, in the doorway of her father's bank, for the second time in a season. The first time, she'd stood in a doorway with a folder and sided with a ruined man against her father, and the town had watched. This time she stood in the same kind of doorway, and there was nothing in her hands at all. Wes crossed the lobby to her. He stopped an arm's length away, aware of the chairs, the counter, her father at the desk behind him, all of it, and none of it mattering. "You called them last night," he said, "after the porch. After I said no to you. You called Alvy and you told him not to do it out of pity for you." He shook his head slowly. "You opened the last door even after I slammed it in your face." "I open doors," she said. "It's what I do." "You open everybody's but your own." She didn't answer that. But her eyes did. "I got it wrong on the porch," Wes said. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I couldn't be the reason you lost a house twice. But that's not what you were offering me, was it? You weren't offering to lose it again. You were offering to trust me with the thing it cost you the most to get back." His voice thickened. He let it. "And I threw it on the ground and called it too much. Same as your father ever did. Same as every desk you ever sat across from." "Yes," she said. Just that. But she didn't leave. She was still standing in the doorway. "Come to the shop," Wes said. "There's something I want you to see." The garage on Kessler Street had a sign over the door now. "Hand-cut plate steel," the letters torched clean and ground smooth. Hung that morning before he'd driven to the bank. "Brandt Fabrication." Underneath it, smaller, a second line, and Nora stopped in the yard when she saw it, because the second line wasn't his name. It was both their names, side by side. Inside, the shop was warm and smelled of ozone and cut metal, and the coffee going cold on the workbench, the black one. The second cup he'd started making out of habit even on the mornings she wasn't there. The MIG welder was uncovered now. The canvas tarp folded in the corner. The plate steel he'd struck his first test arc on sat on the table still. 6 weeks of dust wiped off it. His father's welding hood hung on the nail by the bench. Brandt scratched inside the shell in his father's hand, 40 years old, the paint worn where a man's forehead rides. Wes took it down, off the nail. He held it a moment. Then he reached up and set it on the shelf above the bench, higher, where a thing goes when it's not a tool you grab in desperation anymore, but a thing you keep because of what it means. He turned around. Nora was standing just inside the door. In the doorway again, the way she was always in doorways, on the threshold of every room, opening it for someone else and never quite coming in. "The license is filed," Wes said. "Both names. I did it before I knew if you'd ever speak to me again. Alvy's terms don't need you on them. Doyle's paid. The house is clear. There's nothing on any paper anywhere that says you have to be part of this." He swallowed. "So this isn't a note you're co-signing. There's no risk to your name. There's no math. It's just me. Asking." "Asking what?" she said. "Come inside," he said. "Off the threshold. For once let somebody hold the door for you." He looked at her, and the whole of it was in his face. The plant, and the badge, and the 9 days, and the porch, and the 2 coffees she'd carried away. "Stay, Nora." She stood in the doorway 1 second longer. The light behind her. The shop gold in front of her. Then she came in, and the door swung shut behind her on its own weight, and the shop light closed around the two of them, warm. And that was all the town would ever need to know about what came next. Cardinal Property Group let the house go without a fight. There was nothing to fight over. The arrears were paid. The deed was clear. The case was closed. And the speculator that had spread its letterhead on a workbench under a shop light and offered a beaten man cash to walk away from his father's foundation. It simply moved on to the next plant town, the next list, the next porch with a notice taped to the door. It never spoke to Wes again. Its representative never came back to the kitchen table. The buyout offer sat torn in the bottom of a metal trash can until Wes carried the trash out. And then it was gone, and the house it had wanted stayed lit at night with people living in it. 6 months on, Brandt Fabrication ran 5 days a week and half of Saturday. The old garage on Kessler Street had a new bay door and a rack of stock steel, And the smell that never left it now, ozone and hot metal and grinding dust, and, always, coffee. The shop light came on before 6 most mornings. Wes still showed up early. He'd shown up early to a job that no longer existed, out of habit, for weeks after the plant closed. Now the job existed, and it was his. And he showed up early to that too, and the habit finally had somewhere to go. He wore his father's hood at the bench, not off the nail in a panic, off the shelf, on purpose, settling the weight of it over his head the way his father had. Brant riding against the back of his skull, and he'd strike the arc and the shop would go gold, and the bead would lay down clean and hold. Ownership, not desperation. The same hood. A different man under it. Nora kept her storefront 2 doors down from Rampart. She never gave it up. She still knew every lender in 3 counties by name. And now the county knew her for one more thing. The season she stood in a bank lobby twice, and both times it meant something. Their 2 names sat side by side on the business license framed by the shop door, hers and his, and on the morning she came by with 2 coffees, she came all the way in now. Off the threshold. Through the door. She'd learned to let it be held for her. Raymond Fenn came to see the shop once, that fall. He stood in the yard a while before he came in, an old man in a good coat looking up at a hand-cut steel sign. Then he came into the bay, and he looked at the welder and the stock rack and the 2 names on the license. And he looked at his daughter with the coffee in her hand, at home in a place with her name over the door. He didn't say he was sorry. Wes hadn't expected him to. 40 years doesn't turn around in an afternoon. But he stood there a long moment, taking in the whole of it, the working shop and the lit house behind it, and the 2 people who'd built it out of a thing his forms could never measure. And at last Raymond Fenn, 63 years old, 40 years in lending, said the one dry thing he had in him to say. The bank couldn't carry him. He looked at the sign. He looked at his daughter. Turned out the town could. It wasn't an apology. But Nora heard what it was, and she let it be enough, and she poured her father a coffee from the pot on the bench, and he drank it standing up in the shop his daughter's name had built. That's the whole of it. A laid-off welder no bank would touch, and the loan officer's daughter who opened every door but her own, and a house on Kessler Street that a number said was already lost. Here's the thing the bank never had on any form. A name isn't what a score will lend you. A name is what your neighbors will vouch for when the score says no. Wes Brant learned that on a porch from a slow old man with a term sheet. Nora Fenn had known it for 12 years and spent every one of them proving it. And a whole Rust Belt town that turned in 200 badges and got told it was worthless learned it too. One vouched for name at a time. If you've ever watched your own name turn worthless the day the work dried up, if you know what it is to sit in the know and keep your back straight, then you already understand what Alvy Cross meant on that porch. It was never about the score. Comment the town where your plant closed. I want to see how far this one travels.